and there was one on surfing. And so supposedly there was like a statistic they brought out, like 1 in every 1,000 surfers who like try surfing for the first time will go like paralyzed from the waist down their first time out. Isn't that insane?
That's an insane. I feel like
it's called like
I
the
just saw
surfer
a picture
disease
today
or
of
some
someone
nonsense.
like surfing, holding them with like a leash or something, and like their feet were locked. Like someone, I feel like it's the same thing with skydiving. Like you should have someone tied to you, teaching you how to do something that dangerous. Like in skydiving, they don't just let you jump by yourself. Like you don't know what to do. You're like tied to someone.
That's true. How would they do that with surfboarding? That's crazy because it's all about weight distribution on the board.
I don't know. I feel like an
tough.
expert could definitely like help you though, and like keep it even.
Everybody's
But
doing
you need like the right conditions. Like that's a sport where if you don't have the right conditions, like it would be very hard.
All
You
I
don't have
want
a
to
big
do
enough
is
wave.
go into that wave as it crests
Like the Lilo
over
and Stitch
and
movie.
look like back. That's all I want to do. I just want to do that once, like look back at it and see the watershed.
Yeah,
Look
that would be
back
cool,
at
like
it.
a movie.
Look back at it.
I wish I could do something like that.
One of these days, man. Does New York get waves? Not really, right?
No,
Nothing,
barely.
right?
No.
Your
barely.
water sucks anyway. It's very
It's like
dirty.
murky, yeah.
That's the biggest thing I've probably
Even
noticed.
in Long Island, it's like murky. It's just because like the bacteria and stuff growing in it.
Yeah, this was like the industrial capital of the Northwest, you know, or the North America,
East.
North America.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I thought I aptly labeled this podcast. I think I kind of came up with the idea too. I wanted to talk about a very simple thing today. You know what that is?
Doing your damn job.
Do your job.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? When I say do your job, what's the first thing you think about? Because I feel like you might have a gauge on the rest of the viewers.
When you get up in the morning, you should know what you're already doing that day, and then you need to get at least 4 out of 5 things done.
Kind of. So
yeah.
you're talking about planning here, and you're talking about setting the parameters for your job. I'm talking about after you set the parameters, doing that job.
Yeah.
And as you guys can see today, I'm wearing my New England Patriots t-shirt. That's not an accident. That's because Bill Belichick famously tells his players always, especially if they're in a rough patch during a game or a quarter, do your job. Just do your job. It's funny too.
Cheat on the way to get there.
Right. It's funny too. Like he'll be explaining a play, he'll be explaining a situation, and then he'll cut himself off almost and just be like, just do your job. That's all it is. That's all it is. If you stay in your flat and you don't move from there, then that flat is never going to be unoccupied. It's always going to be defended. You know what I mean? The problem is that sometimes, and this correlates to real life as well, and you'll see this in a second, sometimes a guy who will be playing the flat will think that ball's not going there, that ball's going in the inside. So if I slide a little closer to inside the numbers, I might get a pick. I might be able to even run it back and score myself as a defender. I might get what's called a pick six. And that is like the biggest honor of being a defensive player, when you can score yourself on defense. I might get to be in the newsletter tomorrow. I might get to be in the newspapers and ESPN front line. The pretty girl might come to me with a microphone and say, what did you see on that play? What were you thinking there? That's some football IQ you showed right there. I might get the girls. I might get the money. I might get the contract extension. What happens 99% of the time in situations like that is the opposing team recognizes that you left that area that you were supposed to guard in the play that was supposed to work perfectly well to defend the situation, and he throws that to the flat, and oh, look at that, you just gave up a 15-yard play and a first down. That's what I mean by doing your job. Do your job. Don't worry about what the guy next to you is doing, and don't think about how I can, figure out the game. Da Vinci Code this shit.
What is that called when I'm not too big of a sports guy, but I like dabble in it. I would never call myself an expert. But what is that called when a defensive team scores, like in fantasy when I used to play like 5 years ago? What is that?
Pick
Special
six.
teams? No,
Defensive teams are pick sixes when they score.
But what is that called? Special teams on fantasy?
No, special teams would be special teams.
So is that
You wouldn't
different?
have a special teams though
But
in fantasy. I wouldn't think. No.
But isn't it like when
You have a kicker. Actually, I take that back. You do have kickers in fantasy.
But in some fantasies under kicker, there's like another one, and it's like when the defense of that team scores, and you can pick like any
yeah, that's like an
team's
actual
defense.
defense. So in the way fantasy works is if your team, the defense that you picked, if the opposing team scores 0 points, they start off at a 10, right? Every game the defense starts at 10, and they'll slowly work backwards. But then like they'll give you back a point if they get like a sack, for example, which is tackling the quarterback before he can get the ball out or get past the line of scrimmage, so no yards gained, he loses yardage. Or if like I said, they get an interception, that's one. They force a fumble, they pick up the fumble, that's another one. Or if they grab it and they go back to the opposing end zone and score that way.
But you can gain points like when you get when a special teams gets like a pick six, they gain points on fantasy. Like they would go.
Well,
from
so
10
special
to
teams
+6.
would never get a pick six.
Or the defense.
Some fantasy websites will group the special teams in with the defense. So if they get like a punt block for a touchdown, then that would be points for the defense, which is technically not the defense; it's a whole other branch. But yeah, I see what you're saying here. But just to put a bow on that really quickly, that's what he's talking about. If whenever you hear that on ESPN or like after the game, that's what he's referring to. He's saying don't jump that route because you think you're gonna get a pick six. You think you're gonna get You think you're gonna get the girls, get the money. You think you're gonna be like heads up. This is a professional level. Everybody's heads up. Okay. You're not going to do that. And even if you are, that's 1 in 100. 99 times out of the other 100, you're going to open up a big gap for the other team to exploit. Stay in your lane, stay in your zone, and do your job. That's what I want to talk about today.
To build off that point, I feel like to be able to do your job, and then in these big corporations and big bureaucracies that you're going to find yourself in, everything is specialized and niche. So, like, a team, for example, going back to the fantasy example, like, is split into a kicker, this, that, and this. And that kicker is just, his task is to do his job. Like, he's not going up to the quarterback and telling him what to do. He's focusing and he's on the sidelines during the game practicing kicks.
Very true. I think Tom Brady was quoted saying, whenever, like, a guy asked him, like, hey, what'd you think of that third down play? He, like, almost looks at him befuddled. It's like, I'm the player. That guy over there on the bench with the headset, that's the coach. If you respect those rules and you live by them, you win championships. Like, don't ask a player, what'd you think of that third down call? That's not his job to think about the third down call. That his job is to internalize the information and execute. That's your job. Recognize your job and fill it to a T.
In these big clogs of systems, if things are efficient and organized, like, there are times where you want to, like, break off and go out of your lane to be like greater and have greatness. Like maybe Tom Brady was asking that guy because that player might want to be a coach one day and he wants to break free out of the norms. But that's like on a personal level, and he might know that player like that. That's just giving an example.
When you become a coach, you retire from your position as a player. You go to an organization and you go to an interview process and they ask you a whole myriad of different questions. Like if you're interviewing to be a player, they ask you, how fast can you run the 40-yard dash? How quickly can you do the 3-cone drill? How many reps can you do on the 100-yard dumbbell or whatever it is? When you're asking to be a coach, they'll say, how would you set up a cover 3? How would you set up a cover 2? Explain cover 6 to me. It's a totally different way of thinking, and it's a totally different set of responsibilities, motivation involved. Like, I kind of want to kind of tie this in with the topic in that you don't have to be a coach in your life. If you end your life as a player, like if you retire and you're a player and you're a jersey and you did your best at that position, you should be fucking happy with that. I think everybody
did your job as a player.
Exactly. I think everybody comes into this shit thinking that if you don't end up being the guy with the cigar in his hand, and like the fucking suspenders, then you didn't succeed. That is such a fucking awful way to look at life. There are so many important tasks that guy that we just talked about couldn't have done without you.
Yeah.
You guys are a unit, not a and he's not the master slave. It's a unit, not a despotic relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and all the parts of the team are supposed to work and clog together if everyone's doing their job properly. If like one person's falling out, like even if you had, I never worked in fast food, but I've talked to a lot of people who do, and that still do.
Yeah.
And like if you have like 20 people, you have a manager for each shift, maybe 2 managers per shift. If like both managers don't show up that day and they didn't coordinate with each other, hey, I'm going to be sick this day, hey, I'm going to be that day, and they didn't call the nighttime shift supervisor to come and fill in for the shift before because they both couldn't make it. Those are tasks and responsibilities that they're given and they're like defaulted as managers. So if they fail on their tasks, like the whole thing could collapse, and that's why on some restaurants you see like 30-minute wait times and like the drive-through is backed around the corner one random day of the week because there was a failure of people in that clog in that restaurant to do their jobs, and things like that happen more in our society where you don't get like the napkins and the straws and the ketchup in the bag because the owners are like more disconnected from the restaurants, and the owner lives like 2 states away and they only come check on the restaurant like twice a year.
Yeah.
And so these inefficiencies are allowed to happen and they grow and they form. But the main point is if everyone just in that clog knew what they were supposed to do, like I'm the cashier, I come here every day to be the cashier. You're not going to get rich. No one got rich doing a 9-to-5 job. But for your...
Well, some people did.
Some people did by saving their money like 30, 40 years, then retire, then use that money.
And what I was going to say, too, is that in the 50s, there was this idea that, hey, it was a good idea to hire from within. Yeah. And that's one of the saddest things that I think is lost on our generation
People
today,
hop around
is that it's a hop around, like all these guys, they trade each other around like baseball cards. That's not how it used to be. The guy who owns, or I think he still does, own like a big minority stake in McDonald's was literally a fry cook at one of the first McDonald's. Like, that's how it used to be.
Yeah.
You grilled patties and then you rose up the ladders. The stock boy became the CEO. That was like a term.
Yeah, to finish my point, like I meant that not everybody, it's very few, like you have to save a proportion of your paycheck to get rich doing the 9-to-5. A side point before I close out the other point is, in the wealth management field, which since I was a finance major, the richest people that come to like clients and that are clients and they're coming to like managers with a lot of money, they have like $2, $3, $4 million. It's like someone who worked at Home Depot for like 40 years straight and they put like 15% of their paycheck in. And Home Depot was like $15, $20 a share like 30 years ago. Now it's like $300.
I know. I know stories of janitors who took chunks of their paycheck throughout the years and they put them into dividend stocks, and they died with like $6 million net worth, like crazy things like that.
Yeah, so you can get rich doing the 9-to-5, but there's a lot of people that are listening to podcasts, listening to all those financial gurus on YouTube every day, the real estate gurus that are trying to find a way to break out of the 9-to-5 and get rich, like only do the 9-to-5 for 10, 20 years. Whatever you're doing to grind to build up your starting down payment, your starting capital for your business, like you have a business idea that's, and you ran the numbers and this business is going to cost $80,000 minimum to set up. If I mess up a lot of things, it could cost $120,000 to set up.
Right.
So you got to grind on that 9-to-5 for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is, to pay off the loans. You got to do your job, and you got to go. And if you're the cashier, you got to do that cashier job every day, and you can excel at it. And you got to network and do stuff like that, all the job descriptions that your job entails, and to make sure the clog runs smoothly and everyone around you sees like, oh, that guy's a good worker. Why should they promote you? You're like a good worker, and you come and you do your job every single day, and you don't mess it up. And if you mess it up, it's like the statistics they have for your job, 1 out of 500 times. Like cashier jobs, they'll give you like a couple dollars of range to mess up. And if like you every job has metrics. Like the Amazon jobs are famous for this.
Right.
For having like, oh, you have to scan a package every 15 seconds or something like that. So that's my point.
I would say though too, just to go back to the player-coach relationship a little bit here, because that applies to what you're talking about. Don't feel down on yourself if you get that manager position and it doesn't work out. If you finally get into that role because of the way the ladder is set up at your place, and you realize that managing people, just motivating people, dealing with deadlines, those kinds of things aren't in your wheelhouse. That doesn't mean that you're a failure in life. It just means that particular
the details of that job doesn't fit you,
or that particular role of leadership isn't in your wheelhouse. But that's not, once again, that's not something to like be like, oh, boo-hoo about. I think
find something that's in your lane.
I think if your skill set is nastiness, it's individualism, it's entrepreneurialism, it's being your own boss. I think that there are so many. It's almost like crazy to think that this became like a negative. So many different paths and avenues for you to take that are going to make you a happy life, and it's going to make you a lot of money in the long term. Managing is not for everybody, but that's not a bad thing. There can't, and not everyone can be the manager. Can you imagine?
Exactly. Yeah. Bringing up the manager role is a great point, because if you do your job well, like when I worked at that parcel company for from the summer of 2018 till January 2020.
The parcel company.
Yeah. In 2 months of just doing my job, like they gave me sheets my first week. So there was like 4 or 5 of us hired at once, and then the manager for this section of the building came up, and I was eventually underneath this guy.
Yeah.
So he came up to me, and I had a blue vest on because I was a new hire. This is like a warehouse setting. He came up to me and he looked at all the people, because the interviewer did like a rendezvous in the middle of the shift. So things are moving, boxes are moving around, people are throwing stuff. So it looked intimidating.
Right.
And then he looked up, he looked at all of us and said, "Who wants to memorize the sort chart?" Then he like flipped a sheet 2 pages long. Every single state had different zip codes. So it would say like GA, a number. California, 9 this to that would go here. So, and then Florida, 3 to this number would go blue in different colors. So in like 2 months, probably in 2 weeks, I had the whole thing memorized. And there were like crazy little niche ones where...
And you raised your hand.
Yeah, I raised my hand to learn it. Because I knew it would be better to like stand here and the boxes are coming at you and throw the boxes at colors than like loading an entire trailer with like 100-pound boxes and raising
You're
them.
right, because you recognized that you weren't going to be the guy, hauling and getting the nice sweat going and throwing boxes up there.
Yeah.
You recognized that wasn't going to be your lane. You were going to have to use this a little more than this.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not a bad thing.
Exactly.
And the reverse isn't a bad thing either.
Yeah. So you would have to, what I did, I went home not that night, but by that probably weekend, I printed out like a map that we had, and I think we had to do this in 5th grade, maybe 3rd grade in our school. And I printed out a map of the United States, and then I went in and I color coded all of the things.
Right.
So if like all of California was yellow, so that was a simple one. Like, so California was easy. There's probably like hundreds of individual towns and zip codes, but because we were on the other side of the country, that was just the quickest route, and it would just get thrown into a California van that was yellow at the end of the yellow belt.
Okay.
So you had to memorize things like that, and most of the people that were working with me to the left and the right, like packages coming at them too. Like when I hung up this beautiful map, instead of like just state, CA, next to color, like some people didn't know that like MA was Massachusetts or like AL was Alabama. Like they just knew AL was I think it was purple or pink.
Gotcha.
But it would change all the time too. So if you can do a little something to differentiate yourself, I brought in like a custom map and I learned it in like a week. So the managers like came up and they noticed as they were walking by the aisles and see like, oh, what's that? And they like took it, they brought it to the thing, printed it, and then with 2 months, like I was promoted because they realized like, oh, this kid has what it takes or something like that.
And I think this is just the natural progression of this conversation is, well, now that when you did get your promotion, did you realize in that moment when you got your promotion, you're doing your new job, did you realize that this now was more aligned with your skill set? Did you realize that this was what you were waiting for? Or was it, like I said previous, that you found out that no, that wasn't what you were going to be good at? Managing people wasn't what you were going to be good at. Like, what was your realization?
Well, I didn't really know if I was going to be good or bad because I was more like, I didn't know anyone there, so it was hard to talk to people. Of course. So, but I would say after like 6 months, I like adapted to the role and I like assumed more of like a hard ass type of personality.
But would you say that like being a manager is something that
I
fits
enjoy
with your personality? Is what you're good at?
But you can like mold your personality like a little bit, and you don't have to be the same person at work as you are at home. Like it's easier that way.
Of course.
But sometimes your job, and like when we say do your job. That like your job is to assume a bad role. Like I bet you like there's like a good cop and a bad cop principal. Like a principal of a school, he doesn't enjoy making little kids cry unless he's really sick in the head, and maybe he does. But as an example, like he has to assume that role of punishment. You know what I mean? So everyone just has to do and stay in their lane and do what your job asks of you, even if it's like not good. Like police officers is a big one. They go in there and do their job.
Some of them do.
Yeah.
And your job might not even be like police officers might not even be as clear cut as the guy who's flipping burgers at McDonald's, to go back to the fast food point of view.
They have so many different
if you try to write a manual for a police officer, and there are some, it would be like
in this situation
10 dictionaries pointing to everything, because every situation is new, every situation has different details behind it, and every locale and city and state has their own little nuances on the wall.
Especially now, like now in some cities you can't do a chokehold, and some you can.
Exactly.
Everything is constantly fluid. Like with the burger flipper, his job, he has like 10 tasks max. Wash his hands,
like
flip
2.
a burger, learn when to put the buns, the ketchup and tomato, and show up on time.
Flip the burger, make sure it doesn't burn.
The police officer, every day he's encountered with 1,000 different scenarios, and each scenario has like 20 options what he can do. Like, do I take this person into custody, give them a warning?
Good cop, bad cop, how do I approach this verbally? All of it.
Ask for their driver's license. There's so many different ways that can lead to more paths. That's like one of the... So even when we say do your job, like sometimes your job can be really...
It's messy.
Many things.
It's messy. When I say... and I don't think it falls apart here either in this example. When I say do your job, and then you talk about something fluid like a police officer or like a soldier who like lost communication with his platoon and now he's like in the jungles alone. Like that soldier, by the way, has like the rules of engagement are completely thrown out the book for him. You know what I mean? He's alone behind enemy lines. He's going to do what he needs to do to survive. In those examples, doing your job means now it becomes a matter of keeping yourself alive.
And of your own judgment.
Yeah. Right. And of our Western values, Judeo-Christian values, whatever you want to call them, we hope have instilled in you enough information, enough basic knowledge.
Compass.
Exactly. That you're not going to go off the deep end. But in this case, I think that there needs to be a fallback on individualism almost. Like if you're caught in a pickle like that, you need to fall back on, okay, what's going to be
someone in my shoes do?
Well, what's going to be the best for me in this situation? What's going to be the least risky for me? If I'm a cop and like let's use that example again. If I'm a cop and I have to go into this warehouse where there might be gang activity or something like that, I can either take the pistol or I can take the shotgun, right? What am I going to choose in that situation? A lot of space, potentially
to show up
dozens
there at
of
all.
people, maybe no people. I don't know the situation. It's sketched out. It could be dark. It could.
Do I call for backup?
Yeah, there could be a lot of tight spaces I can't see behind. I'm going to pick the thing that has the biggest spread and the biggest firepower to make sure that I can go home that night and go to bed.
Brave cops do that, but most like the cops, they've banded together and they won't even go to certain areas in Minneapolis because their funding has been completely slashed, their pensions killed.
Yeah,
so
and that's
why even if your job sometimes like isn't giving you the proper like feedback and isn't recognizing you and your work isn't being valued, sometimes that's the moment when you want to switch, because that's why like I think in NYC the NYPD is like they're reaching their maximum amount of people getting but they're reaching the maximum amount of applications per week for people filing for retirement, like hundreds dropping off per week.
Yeah, do your job until leadership has gotten to a point where there is no leadership. And then you change jobs, essentially.
If you see chaos around you and you're the only one still doing your job properly, staying in your lane, doing everything perfect, then the comments that we mentioned earlier... The system has fallen apart already.
Like,
you're the only cog working and
everything's...
all the gears are broken, so you might as well stop yourself and pick another ship.
Abandon ship before the ship takes you down with it. That's the worst thing that can happen to somebody, I think.
Exactly.
Is getting caught in a rut.
It burns you out. Like you're now you realize...
Because now you're doing other people's work on top of yourself.
Just stole the words out of my mouth. Now you have to compensate for the person who showed up 30 minutes late, the person who didn't come in that day, and you're doing more than one person can handle. You're going to burn yourself out for a ship that already is sinking, and the managers don't even have common sense, and they're not helping with the organization. And why would you stay in your lane and keep doing your job if nothing around you is working? So everything is circumstantial and situational.
You're in your lane, but like the lane is now going towards an exit. You know what I mean? Like you're going on the off ramp here. Mm-hmm. It's too much. The system has failed you essentially, and you need to get off. And I think that that's something that you need to be very mindful of when you're in like a work environment. I think that that's another natural progression of the conversation is like what to do when your boss becomes almost like the enemy. When your boss is leading you towards a plan of self-destruction. I think some people have this idea in their head where they're going to stay in the job to either think that they're going to undercut the boss and take his job, like maybe they create a faster death for the company, or they become like a muckracker, a guy who sits in the back with his arms crossed like this and just points out all the shit that's going on here. The food sucks, the service sucks, no wonder we're not getting any business. The lines wrap around the building, nobody does anything about it, nobody cleans the bathrooms anymore. But like you're not doing those things either. Exactly. You're just looking back and kind of shooting spitballs. 2 hours
per day.
Yeah, you're just shooting spitballs at the management too.
Yeah.
Just kind of deriding the whole situation. Those two examples, trying to take the boss's job, by sort of undercutting him, and also just sitting back and basically falling in line with everybody else and just bullshitting, I think are the two things you want to avoid in this situation. I think getting off that off ramp is probably the most the wisest move you can make in a situation like that, the most heady decision.
Yeah, I would say, going back to my point where like everything's relative, everything's situational. So you have to know when to turn your perception on and off. If things are a disaster around you and it looks like this small business is going to crash, then you should abandon ship. But there's also moments where things around you are just noise and drama. Two employees are fighting, but like the tasks and your daily goal. Go ahead, bring back that coffee pot. But your tasks and here, I'll put it over here. Fill me up. Your tasks and your daily goals are still met. Like if you go through any drive-through, Taco Bell, Burger King, McDonald's, and you like look through the window a little bit, you'll notice that there's a screen up there and it's counting down how long you've been in line. And all those restaurants have a target, like 5 minutes, under 4 minutes. So if your company is that and the clog in the system that you're in, if that clog and system is still meeting the goals, like for example the 5 minute per order thing, but there's bickering and things going around, you need to tune your perception off and go back to staying in your job, staying in your lane, and doing your purpose, so that people snap out of it and the clogs also start turning and going back to normal. Because thank you.
Your coffee, honey.
Thank you, sir.
Continue.
And definitely you need to find that point when to be perceptive and when to turn it off. It's very rare where you need to completely abandon ship in a big corporation. Like a giant corporation where there's hundreds of employees per location, like a big warehouse or something like that. Most likely the department that you're in, the department that you're in is just having dysfunctional problems, and the entire company as a whole is listed on the Fortune 500 or is a multi-billion dollar company. So abandoning your progress if you've been there years is sometimes not worth it, because companies in upper management where there's multiple layers of management, 5, 6, 7 layers of management, they're going to eventually over time see that the manager above you, he's not meeting numbers, this area is inefficient, and they're going to take him, move him somewhere else. Inefficient, that's what I meant. They're going to take that person, move them somewhere else, he or she, whatever it is.
Right.
And so if
or
you're
it
or these
we're
days,
respectful of all kinds, creeds, backgrounds here on the Postal Podcast.
My freshman year of college, they asked me, like when I moved right into the dorm, what's your like the interest, first name, last name, what are you interested in, what room are you in, and then everyone, the RA got like the 30 people together, but the last question on it was he or she, what's your pronoun, and I put it.
It's not even it, it's they, them, and then in Canada they have like gere or gire. Those are
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like different countries like made up different names, like Theos or Zeta.
Wow.
You don't remember like Xena, the princess warrior? The alien princess warrior.
Really
that's Xena. That's one of the other ones.
But whatever your pronoun is, just go into
Watch
that.
our podcast.
Go into that warehouse and do your job every day. And if you notice things are going bad, then speak up. But otherwise, 99% of the time, just go in there, get your paycheck, and keep grinding towards your overall goal, that overall side business that you got going on, the thing that's going to really get you rich fast.
So we've just about hit the halfway point of this podcast, maybe a little bit over. I think for the second part, I think maybe we talk a little bit about our own experiences. You, of course, already touched on your background with the parcel company. And then I think we should talk about the future for people, what they should do after college and their 40-year, 50-year plan. So I think I'll start it off really quickly. I didn't do anything work related really until college, and I know for some of you that might be crazy. For some of you, you might not have a job yet and you've just graduated college, you've never had a job. Like my roommate, for example, really never did any kind of real work, real paycheck work. And
not this roommate.
He's 23. No, not you.
I know, I'm just kidding.
Roommate from college. But I started out a summer job. I made pizzas. I
didn't know that. I thought you were just at that sushi shop.
No, I made pizzas.
What year and what area is this?
This is Davie. We had a little pizza place connected to a movie theater.
The summer after high school?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
The summer after my freshman year of college. I came back home and I got a pizza job. Okay? That's cool. I made pizzas. I made pizzas for minimum wage. And maybe $1 tip a week, something ridiculous. Was it still $8.25? I think was it Florida's $8.05 actually.
Wow, that's crazy.
So I did that for one summer, and then went back to school, focused on school. My mom wants me to focus on school at the time too, and then came back, did the same thing the next summer, but for a longer period of time. I think for the first summer I did like a month and a half. For the second summer I did like all 3 months just about. And then coming back to school my junior year in October, I started off working at a restaurant, actually making good money, $12 an hour plus tip. and these weren't like bare bones tips either. These were like a very like well off part of Pennsylvania, getting tips on top of that. So I was definitely taking home like maybe like close to 17 an hour with
That's
the tips
awesome.
included. It was
Especially
very,
for Pennsylvania, it's lower cost of living, but not the lowest of the low.
and I was
It's like probably mid.
and I wasn't doing really any cost of living other than
The
I was
dorm.
paying back my. No, I wasn't doing that. I was paying back my
off campus at
my
that time.
my car. No, I was on campus, but my mother was paying for that. I was
Oh,
paying
nice.
for my car. I was paying for my phone. I was paying for if I wanted to eat out, like she would do market, like the supermarket or whatever, and I would do anything else I wanted, like Chipotle or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much it. And with that, you know, I was able to kind of build up my credit, build up my bank account. And by the end of senior year, I did this job like pretty much throughout senior year until just about COVID hit. I was able to have at least like $12,000 net worth.
Nice.
In terms of like what I had
Yeah.
in my bank account, like things available to me.
You did that job, not to cut you off, in the fall and in the spring while
I
you were in
I
classes?
did it all through. I started in October of 2018
Congratulations.
or
That's
whatever,
so hard to do.
and I just kept going. I did an internship with the earlier part of that year, and then once that internship kind of ended, I transitioned over to this, and I did it over the summer too. I didn't even come back down home. I got a lease, and I stayed up there. And they lost people, obviously, during the summer. You always lose young kids. So my hours went through the roof.
Gotcha.
And I was making overtime then, too. Like, don't strive for overtime, though. That is, but it is kind of crazy
You
how...
have to weigh it. Like,
of
do you
course,
need
but it
or
is
do you
kind of
not?
crazy how the laws start to change once you go past 80 hours in 2 weeks. If you go past 80 hours in 2 weeks,
Or 1
it
week
goes
even.
it goes up to like 150% of your paycheck. It adds up very fast.
But the taxes, one thing that people at the United Postal one that I worked at, nobody at Amazon complained about overtime. They wanted it. But I only worked at Amazon like 2 months in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
They, like, people at United Postal, like, if you weren't in management, you were in a union. So
You said
people
you worked at Amazon?
Yeah, in 2017.
For 1 week, you said?
No, for 2 months.
Oh, what were you doing there?
I was just a
I haven't
regular
really
person.
heard this story too much.
This was I didn't even have a car. I took the bus there. The warehouse was in Bethpage. I think I mentioned it the other day.
Well, you mentioned that you wanted to get into it before they had to cut ties with New York, but I didn't know that like you had already like a history with them.
Yeah, I wanted to jump from United Postal to Amazon once they build that like New York HQ, but the politicians shut that down.
Yeah, but what were you doing in this little offshoot warehouse?
I went to Amazon like one whole year before United Postal. I went just for 2 months in the summer, like July to August.
To do what? Were you like running packages back and forth like they talk about people do now? Like
Yeah, but it
Prime?
was like less of a fulfillment warehouse and it was more of a shipping warehouse. Like trucks would come and
you filled
be
the
filled.
trucks?
No, this was more of the trucks would come and we would empty them out, and then we would sort them into like bags and then put them onto smaller delivery vans.
I'm not gonna lie to you. That sounds like a horrible way to spend 8 hours a day.
Yeah, it was longer. So I remember on
That was your shift, right? 8-hour shifts.
I did even longer sometimes, like
Jesus.
11 p.m. till like my worst shift was 11 p.m. till like 1 p.m. the next day. But I probably made the base pay.
Wait,
this
like
is
you went
20
overnight.
Yeah, overnight. So that's why I tried to do
Guys.
it 1 week in September. Like I did it, but I had a weird shift time too. Like I had like Thursday to Sunday night.
What do you think about Amazon? Like as a company,
Overall?
like their practices, because that sounds horrible. 11 to 1.
Well, if you're good at staying in your lane and doing your job and doing one task, like that's a great place for you. Because in 2017, while you were making $8.05 in South Florida at the pizza
and a
place,
dollar in tips, yeah.
Amazon was giving me like $14.75, and the minimum wage in Nassau County was only like
Well, yeah,
10 or
they made the
$11.
minimum wage $15.
in Nassau County.
But
now
I think
it is.
you also have
But
to
at
weigh
that time,
the
like, that
stress
was a
on
huge-
yourself
yeah.
for $15 too.
I mean, that's why I didn't stay there too long. Like I did 2 months, a little bit less than 2 months, and because the application process took a while. I wanted to go there early June, but like they drug test you and things like that.
Did you just stay there because of the summertime, or would you?
I
have
was just
stayed
there
longer?
in the summer.
Yeah,
I would
but
have stayed longer if
you were there?
they moved my hours, because like I had a class at like 9 or 10 a.m. on Monday, and I tried it for one weekend right before I had classes. I didn't even make it 1 week. So my first class was Monday at like 9 or 10 a.m. And I remember getting there at like 11 p.m. a little bit before that. I think the shift started at like 10:30 p.m. that day. And I worked all throughout the night, and I had to like beg them to leave. Like I rushed like the last half hour, like working at like double the speed, but they weren't paying me to work double the speed.
Did you work overnight? Like,
yeah, I worked overnight.
So you're planning to go to class without going to bed?
Yeah, I was going to try to do
crazy.
that. And then I would go to bed at like noon or...
after class,
or like 2 p.m. because I think I had 2 classes on Monday, 1 on Tuesday.
Fuck.
But I would only have had to do that Sunday night and Thursday night, and I wouldn't have had any classes Friday night. But what really killed it for me is I had to take the bus back because I didn't have a car, and I like rushed really fast. And if like the buses weren't that frequent because this isn't New York City, this is the county over, Nassau County.
Right.
They were like the buses were every like 30 minutes, and like they didn't go into the back streets. They would just go along the main avenue. So I would have to walk like 20 minutes to the bus and then hope it actually comes.
Right.
Because I definitely, if I would have stayed at that job, I would have missed like the first 30 minutes of my class. And at that point, like the class, you're paying like hundreds per class, so you shouldn't value your job. So I knew I had to quit.
Don't forget, guys, that your education is so much more important than any side packaging job, any side food job that you can get. I know the easy money feels so good, though. I know it's almost intoxicating how quick and easy it is, and how like much your paycheck, you think how much your paycheck is, but you have to like just keep reminding yourself day in and day out how this is, but how also this is like all like a fantasy world that you're living in. Like for a lot of you, you're in the same boat as me, that your mom or dad is like paying for a lot of your shit already. And for a situation like you, where your parents were obviously paying for less stuff, you still had like the comfort of the college atmosphere and everything like that. You have to keep reminding yourself that like these are not the bills of the real world. These are the bills of the fake, fantasy world. And this is just to get yourself a little nest egg going. If you guys ever have a chance, I would suggest you read the Freakonomic books, like all of them.
Oh wow, those are great.
They're all awesome. There's a hilarious quote in like the introduction to one of the books where they just answer like kind of like a lot of the questions quickly, because usually they'll do like a chapter per question. And one of them was, "Is it a good idea to go to college?" And the guy writes, "Short answer, yes," and it's long answer, also yes.
It really depends, because if you're in some parts of the Midwest, like you can sneak and become like an electrical lineman and make like 80, 90, 100,000 a year.
Technical college counts though too. I'm counting, when I say college, I mean college and
to get a degree, college. A piece of paper that's giving you certifications to make more money.
Some things are absolute horseshit that they require certification for. Like, did you know that nail technicians need a license for that? That is government bureaucracy up the ass, ruining just basic things that you should be allowed to do. And there's a guy, I forget his name, in New Hampshire, who got arrested for cutting a woman's hair outside the capital of the state of New Hampshire, because in that state you need a license for it. And this is all just so that they can make more money. Like it's all a scheme. And people don't realize that. They think like, oh yeah, you should get a degree for cutting hair. It's like, if you don't like a haircut, you go to the next salon over. That's how the free market is supposed to work. Not a licensing agreement with the hair companies or hair salons. It's just ridiculous.
Probably one person got like a really chopped up haircut and then complained and cried all the way to the town hall.
And just ruined it for the rest of us.
Ruined it for the rest of us. But now
like they put like cyanide in the hair. No, this will keep the roots. This will keep the roots good.
But when you get to that level, like if it's an establishment and someone really messed up your hair and like ruined like a month of your life, like you have the power to sue that company into nothing. So like the free market will automatically regulate these places. Like, so with the licensing and the bureaucracy that you were just talking about, so all the government like went into all these hair salons, closed them down, And the haircuts didn't just stop. Yeah. Maybe mine did.
Not the salons though. The people who rent out those chairs.
Yeah.
Because those people don't realize sometimes those people are almost
like that. Yeah.
Like free agents almost.
Yeah, like your Uber driver, like a freelancer. Like they pay like a couple hundred for that chair.
A contractor is what they would call them, right?
Yeah, and they get maybe a more percentage of the haircut if that salon's set up that way. But think of the person that owns the whole spot and is getting like $3,000 per month, or owns the whole plaza. Like that, they're losing that amount of rent per month, and they're not able to pay back like the mortgage if they have like a 20-80% mortgage on the property. Like that, now they lose that cash.
These are like common sense things, and I'm gonna do a real hot take here for a second. I think that Yelp, as funny of an app as that has done more to steer people in the right direction on which is good hair salon or actual stylist versus the bad stylist than government regulation, red tape, and those stupid licenses ever could.
Exactly. Because on Yelp, like, you could get 100 good reviews, they're perfect, but one person gets like one little hair in their food, it's going to be on Yelp, it's going to be the number one on the page, 1 star, blatant, angry emojis.
And more importantly,
so you're gonna make sure you don't get that bad review.
And more importantly, the company is gonna have to make a strategic decision in their head. How much business am I gonna lose? How much clout am I gonna lose by not responding to that person and saying, "Hey, my bad, guy or girl. Next time you come, or Jer or they." Next time you come in here, see, we got it. Next time you come in here, $20 off your next order, 20% off your next order, versus just ignoring the comment. You have to weigh that in your head now, and then that's like survival of the fittest almost in the corporation world.
The best haircutting places I've been to was where the barber like had an ownership in the whole business. Like, so it was like 3 or 4 barbers, and they partnered up.
Right.
And they made a nice location, and they would offer, they had a good interest in getting people to return, customers coming back. So they build a relationship with you, and if you're a new customer, Yelp has been such a huge, or just Google reviews or any reviewing for the free market to have control over these businesses. I remember probably at least 2 times in my life. One time in Garden City, this like haircutting place, he said, "Hey, I know the haircut's $30, but if you if you like your haircut, like," because he heard me saying, "Wow, this is the best haircut I've gotten in like a year." He said, "If you like it, go on Yelp right now and write it like just a 2-sentence review, and I'll give you $15 off the haircut." And so like I'm like, wow, that's easy. Boom, 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 boom.
That's sweet.
So we had like hundreds of reviews on Yelp versus like the place 2-3 blocks down, which only had 26 reviews, random
Tell me if you do this, and then I want to ask you one more question. Tell me if you do this. When I get like an offer like that, like a deal like that, I'll sometimes go in, and if there's a tip line, I'll sometimes do a couple extra dollars for that individual because the company was so nice with that deal. Tell me if you do the same thing.
Well, I gave him a $20 bill because then he got to keep $5 of that.
Yeah,
of that from that 15.
Yeah, because they saved
I was
going to
pay 30,
and
exactly. All it took me was maybe, if I'm being realistic, probably a little more than 5 minutes because I had to remember I didn't have the Yelp app. I hadn't used it in a couple months, so I had to re-download it, put in my info, blah blah blah.
Yes.
But it did not take over 10 minutes. So $15 for 10 minutes of my time, like mentioning the Freakonomics, like you have to train your mind to think of how much your time is worth. And at that time when I went there, probably 3 years ago, still a college student, like $10 for for $10 really, because I gave him the $5 tip. But I would have probably had to give him a $5 tip on 30 anyway, and then $5 would have looked weak on 30.
Very true. $5 looks a lot nicer on 20 than it does on 30 or
on
15.
15, yeah, exactly.
15.
So,
but my second thing that I wanted to ask you was, because we were just talking about colleges and what I did with college, I know that you were working for Hofstra for a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And doing like swiping people into the dorms.
Yeah.
For a little bit. What was that experience like? Was it worth it, do you think, working for the college? I'm really curious.
Well, that was one of those jobs where you didn't stay out of your lane. So at the entrance of every one of these residential halls, there's like a little booth and a turnstile, like a security type turnstile, because it was neighboring a really rich town and a really poor town to the west of the thing, Hempstead. In like the 2010s, early 2010s, there was a lot of MS-13 gang activity there. Like some stories would come up, like a girl's walking to the bar, gets stabbed.
Well,
but that
so
got cleaned
you
up the
were
past 5 years.
your job was to make sure people lived in the dorms.
Yeah.
Take their cards, swipe them, see if it got a green bell or whatever, and then hand it back.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was like a automatic swiping, and like I was in a booth with like a little microphone thing and a little cutout hole. So if they had a guest, they would give me their state ID, and then I would write down. This it's very archaic. Like they probably had this system set up since the 80s. And listen to this. Yeah. You could tell, like, oh, this guy's been here for a week. But they had rules, like, oh, an ID card isn't supposed to be in the box for 3 days straight. That means that guest hasn't left the room for 3 days straight. But that's why things get lost in the bureaucracy. Like, I was, like, sometimes in the resident halls of my friends, like, I wouldn't tell on my friends that they had a girl or a boyfriend over for more than 3 days. Because people were trying
to make them like live there. That's crazy.
Because maybe there was like 1 or 2 rooms empty on the top floor with a lounge, and like people got away with it. Like they snuck in their best friend for like a week or 2 to crash.
Oh, that happened all the time. At my place,
at every college, definitely. Like people are like drifters and
hitchhikers.
So you got to make sure that the people that were coming in, since we were neighboring that town, were like good. So there was like a turnstile. So I could just sit there on my laptop, do my homework, but I was only getting like, when I first got that job, the beginning, I think I got hired April 2017. It was the federal minimum wage because like Hofstra claimed that they weren't like part of New York, like they were like a
public
global,
or private school?
Private.
Okay.
So, but they were trying to claim like, oh, we don't have to pay New York minimum wage, so they only paid like $7.25.
Yikes.
So I worked there. Also, the summer I was at Amazon, so I had 2 jobs, and then I just stuck with
raking it in.
I guess, yeah, because $7.25 doesn't stack up as fast as $14.75.
No.
So,
but you have the rare example of being somebody who during their college career worked at the university, because a lot of people on here are probably in college and wondering wondering if they should do that. Sure. And then also while during your college career you worked outside of the university mainframe. Which one would you suggest for somebody out there who's in college right now? Which one is the better path to follow, you think?
If you don't have a car and you don't have transportation, you got to do on campus. Because the Amazon one, I probably spent like an hour and a half getting to and from that.
And money on transportation.
Yeah, like, and the bus was $2.75
I knew people who were paying Ubers and Lyfts to get to work every day. Oh, that's
really bad, yeah. At UPS, some of my co-workers, when I wasn't a supervisor, I noticed they were like pulling up, and they told me like they were paying like $15-$20 some day for like,
that's
Ubers
basically like at my work doing like an hour and a half subtracted from the time that you're in there for. If you have an 8-hour shift, it's really a 6.5-hour shift based on what you've been doing to yourself with transportation.
During the summer when we didn't have as much package volume, like the shift times would only be 4 or 5 hours. So like
Yikes.
That's a total clown move, wasting like almost 2 hours on a 5-hour shift.
Seriously.
Like you might as well not even be coming.
Yeah, so depending on transportation, I think that's why in the first podcast we had, I said, if you can, get a car.
Yeah.
Or a bike. You know, you have that electric bike coming. That one's going to be pretty sweet.
Yeah, and it's going to save miles on a regular car.
That's going to change, I think, the way people look at transportation a little bit if it turns out to be cool.
Yeah.
So do the college thing, which I never had the opportunity to do or never wanted to do because I didn't really was interested in that until my last 2 years, and by then I had the car. Do that if you don't. Get your money, make your money, and also be close up to being on campus and not missing your classes. And then later, if you have the opportunity to, maybe then you can look to branch out. And then I think with these 5 minutes or so that we have left, let's really quickly touch on like after graduation. Like, what do you think the move is for some of these people?
Hold that one thought, because I want to make one point about that. resident safety job. So the manager of that whole thing was like probably a 35, 40-year-old woman, and she used to be the lowest rung. She was a student at the school, and she used to do the same job I did. And then there were supervisors, then there were supervisors above them, then there were shift coordinators, like 3 of them, and then there was the manager. And everyone below her was students. And there was like a office in the student center, and she used to be a student. And she like coordinated this whole thing and had maybe 100 or 120 employees under her, and they were all students. And every single person came in there, asked like, and had to have an interview like, why do you want to be a security guard, blah blah blah, and here are your job details, and here are your job requirements. Do you think you'll be able to keep the campus safe? And so do your job. Like, if you, going back to the title of the podcast, like, if you can't do your job sitting on your laptop watching Netflix, and every 10 minutes, if you're lucky, instead of every 2 minutes, a guest comes and signs their ID in, and you can't realize like, hey, this is like not the same person. Why is this person coming in alone? Where's their friend that they're supposed to be with? You could potentially be putting someone else's life in danger. And a lot of jobs, they're jobs because they're needed. So if you're slacking in your job, you could actually be literally just, you're dragging down society by inefficiencies, or worse, you're putting someone's life in danger.
Right. I would say avoid that, though. That's a little bit off your what your main point was for that little anecdote. But I would say avoid what your main big boss did, because I've seen that more times than you'd expect. We went to a K through 12 school where pretty much everybody who I knew who was like a principal or something there, you would talk to them, and it would be like, hey, like, what was your, well, back in the 80s, I went to so-and-so school. I was like, that kind of thing makes me scratch my head.
Yeah,
and
like,
I was in college too.
I was just mentioning that because with the theme of this podcast, like, she stayed in her lane and did her job so well. Like, she was very rigorous, and she wrote a handbook, and she knew every single rule and made it a very rigorous.
Oh no, I'm not questioning you. You're probably a great employee if you ended up on that pathway. There's only
one on top of a pyramid of 100, so not everyone can do that, like you said earlier.
Yeah, but it also just makes me scratch my head. I don't know why you would get yourself. I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe just some people are just that way. They're wired that way, that they find a rhythm. They find
to the top.
They find us.
Yeah.
Well, not even a corporate ladder, like a school ladder.
Yeah.
They find. They're creatures of habit. And like, they can't like leave the nest, you know.
Yeah.
I went to school here. Now I need to stay here until I'm 75.
And
that's crazy to me.
She lived in like one of the graduate student dorms, so they were a little nicer and had like, each dorm had their own kitchen. And she eventually, I think, like, brought her family there and like had a whole like, and lived in the dorm, because the dorm, like, if you get a university job and you are ahead of this department, that department, some universities will offer you free housing. So if you are good and you stick in your lane and you really achieve, you can go far and get a lot of benefits in like many different sectors or bureaucracies, or just like a simple system of like a larger school where there's tens of departments, hundreds of departments, a business department, this.
Tons of
like
things,
you can find yourself in the safety department. I think people, and strive in the safety department. People in the cafeteria department, when I first went to the school, if you worked there like 2 years, someone in your family could get like half off tuition. But there were so many people, like students, that would work themselves in the food court, but that they had to move the rule up to 5 years.
Right.
So there's benefits and there's things in society that you can take advantage of and give yourself a leg up, as long as you do your job and you go there every day. Because 90% of it is literally just showing up and doing what's asked of you.
Yeah, I was gonna use the next point to talk about, as limited as our experience is on the next stage of this, the natural progression of this, which would be after college, doing the career. I think all the little points we made throughout the podcast kind of summed it up already. It was stay grinding, stay disciplined, stay in your lane, do your job, And in terms of finding something, those opportunities will come, and then if it's even not what you had pictured right off the bat, don't necessarily be disconcerted with the situation. You can wait a little bit if you're doing all the things that I just previously listed off, and then you might see that head shift guy come into the thing and say, who wants to learn all the zip codes in the country in about 2 weeks, and then you raise your hand for that situation.
Sweating in 100-degree weather.
Exactly. And then you find yourself in that situation, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, this isn't that bad. This is what I pictured in the first place.
If you're doing what you're supposed to, and you're doing it very well, chance and the heavens will fall into your lap, and promotions will find you because you're doing what you are supposed to, your job description, really well. So the people above you are going to think, hey, if that guy can do this really well, follow that task really well, he's going to be able to do more responsibilities.
Exactly. I think on that point, we'll probably leave it here. This has been Jeff, Cryptic. Thank you for spending your Saturday evening with us.
From the studio apartment.
From the studio apartment. I love it. And as always, guys, remember to keep it postal. Peace out.
Gone Postal.